Welcome into Win the Line, presented by the 33rd team. My name is Tanner Kern, joined alongside former CFL defensive lineman Maxx Forde. It is wild card weekend in the NFL. Crazy to think we're already here, but we're ready for it from a betting and DFS standpoint. Can't wait to break it down from a trends perspective today. Max, what's your thoughts, man? We're already to the wild card weekend. It's kind of crazy.
Man, it's exciting. It came down to the wire for some of these teams to get in, and then obviously a few of them, like the buys, were secured pretty early. Didn't have to wait on those in Week 18, but yeah, exciting. You cut down the league by a little bit more than half, and now you got the top half of the league going after it, trying to get that Lombardi.
Definitely, and two of those teams that didn't really have much of a sweat getting in the playoffs, who we're going to talk about right now because they don't play this weekend, the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers. Max, we can start with the Ravens. I think we talked about the Ravens and the 49ers pretty much every week because of how dominant they've been on both sides of the football here. But looking at this Ravens defense, coming in the postseason, what's your thoughts on them?
Yeah, well, they led the NFL in sacks this year. I know a lot of that's because they converted their pressures to sacks at a pretty good rate. A lot of teams, like, you get some pressures, they don't end in sacks. For the Ravens, it didn't happen quite as much when they're getting back there. They're getting the guy on the ground. But that defensive line really stepped it up. You got Justin Madubuike out there who, from that 3-4 defensive end position, which we talked is a hard position to pass rush from, got 13 sacks this year. That's pretty impressive year. They got, I know we talked about earlier in the season when they're bringing in Jadeveon Clowney. We're thinking of him as maybe more of a guy who can help stop the run. He's produced in all facets, playing that outside linebacker role, dropping a little bit more than I've seen him do in his career too, doing all kinds of things over there. And just they've been very impressive on defense, just causing havoc and making trouble for the offenses they go against.
Definitely. From an offensive line perspective, I want to give a little shout out to Patrick Ricard too. I mean, fullbacks are basically honorary offensive linemen. Bringing him in and really using him in the run game is huge for them. The offensive line has a lot of talent, but obviously you have Lamar Jackson in there as well, so he can make any offensive line look good. But this unit's really done a nice job this season. San Francisco 49ers, I do think their defensive front has the edge over the Baltimore Ravens. If we did get this game again, I know the Ravens dominated the first one, but what do you think about the 49ers defensive line, how they compare to the Ravens up front?
Man, it's just the 49ers defense in front. You just look at it, it's the depth, man. And they've got the top end talent too, but the depth is insane. Like, you've got guys that could start for many other teams in this league that are coming in as rotational players for the 49ers. You've got obviously top end players there, and Nick Bosa. They brought in Chase Young midseason. They've got Javon Hargrave. They just got so many guys that would be the focal piece of a defensive line for many teams around this league. And in San Francisco, I'm not going to say they're just another cog, because they're not, but they're a piece of just a very, very talented defensive line that can take over games and has the potential to turn any game on its head. That even if the offense isn't playing well, which in San Francisco isn't really a thing typically. Obviously, they did have that game against Baltimore early in the season, but they also get the complementary football piece on their side a lot of games too.
Definitely. And then from an offensive line perspective here, Trent Williams obviously leads the group. But something to notice here, the best two teams in the NFL probably, they both run fullbacks a lot. Kyle Juszczyk going for the 49ers as well. So that's something to notice too. They have great run games. They have really good offensive lines, and they use their fullbacks well. So something to notice going into the later rounds of the playoffs with these two teams and how they match up against their opponents. So we're going to break down every single game this weekend, spend a couple minutes on each of them, and we get a nice one to start. The Cleveland Browns against the Houston Texans. The Texans are a 2.5-point home underdog, and home dogs have been very profitable in the playoffs. But Max, we look at the Cleveland Browns defense. They are very good, and they're going to give C.J. Stroud a lot of trouble. So do you see them getting to him in this one?
Yeah, I feel like they've got to be able to get to him for sure. With the defense that they have, they allowed the fewest yards in the league this year. We've got Myles Garrett up front. Again, another premier player. It's probably going to be a theme here because teams with good trenches players tend to make the playoffs. So you got another premier player in Myles Garrett there. Zadarius Smith across from him causes havoc. He has a high motor, causes quarterback to move off the spot a lot of times, which can make it easier for somebody else to clean up. And going against this Texans team, Texans haven't really had a lot of help along the offensive front at times this year. Haven't really been able to play probably the five you expected them to play together. I think at all going into this year, like starting the year, I think they had four of the projected starters started the season out the first game. So they've got a lot of those guys back, but I think it's just going to be tough. And we've seen CJ Stroud get hit a little bit. I think this is a game where Cleveland can get to him as well.
Yeah, what CJ Stroud has done this season under pressure has been remarkable to watch. But you look at this offensive line, there's talent there. Laremy Tunsil and Shaq Mason, just to name a few of the guys. They can get after it, but they really haven't found that run game all season. They're in the bottom third of the NFL in rushing yards per game. And in the playoffs, I think the best teams, we look at the Ravens and the 49ers, the projected ones to be there at the end, they can run the football. So you can't put this full game on CJ Stroud. And based on what the offensive line has done this season, it's probably going to turn to that. Not a good formula against this Cleveland Browns football team. Moving into our next game here, we have the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs. A little tidbit on the Dolphins here. They have lost their past 10 games when the weather is under 40 degrees at kickoff. They're a 4.5-point underdog on the road here. Chiefs offense and offensive line, Maxx, have not been great this season. They haven't figured it out. But Miami has no edge rushers. So how is that going to impact them at Arrowhead Stadium on Saturday night?
Man, it's brutal. Just looking at their injury report, man, they've lost their top 4 edge players. They're literally picking up off their practice roster at this point, which definitely still professionals. They're there for a reason, but obviously not the guys that they're expecting to depend on, especially at this juncture in the season when if you don't win, you're going home. So this is going to be a tough one for Miami to find something. I think if you're Kansas City, you got to try to exploit that, try to hit the edges a little bit. You expect Patrick Mahomes to hopefully have a little bit more time to pass because on their offensive line, that the tackles positions have probably been the spots where they're a little bit more questionable. Juwan Taylor has a lot of leads the league in penalties this year. But hopefully going against a team that's lost pretty much all their edges should help. I will say that Melvin Ingram was on Miami's practice roster there, so there is some experience, but he's also kind of in the twilight of his career. A very good player. Don't want to dismiss that, but he wasn't on the main roster for a reason coming into this. And I just see this as an opportunity for the Chiefs to probably advance here. I don't know if their offense is going to be explosive like they've been in years past. They haven't been this year, but I think they have enough of an advantage basically on those tackle positions at the edge, and then also on defense as well. Their defense has been very impressive this year.
Definitely. And the big boys up front don't get a lot of credit. So when you know an offensive lineman name, you're just like a bystander watching football, and you know who an offensive lineman is, maybe not of the team that you support, like Juwan Taylor, it's probably because they're doing something wrong. And he was the guy that was lined up in the backfield a lot earlier in the season, still does it a lot and has a lot of penalties because of it. But Maxx, going back to your playing days when you're going against a mobile quarterback, obviously you never played it against anyone as good as Patrick Mahomes, right? But going against a talented mobile quarterback that can escape pockets and evade pressure, how did you approach that as a defensive lineman?
Yeah, you just got to try to do it together as a unit because if I kind of like what I was saying with Zadarius Smith there earlier, if you can move them off the spot and somebody else has to be where they're supposed to be to clean that up. I know there's been guys that I've played against, quarterbacks I played against that maneuver the pocket very well. Not even always guys that are the most mobile. They just know how to kind of step up, step out kind of a thing. Just sometimes that extra 1 or 2 feet can make a huge difference on your rush angle. So if you can get that guy to move, like if you can get him to step up and move out, then the defensive tackle, like a 3 technique, you would hope is there where they're supposed to be and they can finish that play up. But when you're playing against a mobile quarterback, somebody who can kind of get out of that structure and make plays. You want to be able to play as a line. You got to know where you're supposed to be, and all 4 of you got to rush together. Or if it's a blitz, all 5, 6, whatever. But you just got to rush together as a unit, be where you're supposed to be. And sometimes it looks nice to take that inside move, but if you take it, you better make it, because if you don't, then you might be getting chewed out on the sideline.
Definitely got to collapse the pocket, and you can't arm tackle here. That's the biggest thing with Mahomes. If you don't fully go into him and fully try to take him down, you're going to be in trouble. It's easier said than done, but he has caused a lot of defensive trouble this season, even in a year where he's just not putting up the numbers that we're used to seeing. Another, another bad weather game, I should say. It's probably going to be snow in Buffalo here. 9.5-point favorite, Buffalo Bills against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everyone expects this game to be a blowout, Max. Pittsburgh does not have TJ Watt. They are 1-10 when he is not dressed for a game. So really not a good spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But how do you see these backups coming in the game, knowing how to handle Josh Allen?
Yeah, I expect them to try to be taking their opportunity. Sometimes when you're playing professional football, you don't get your opportunity until somebody gets hurt because you've got a guy like TJ Watt in front of you. And when you get that shot, you want to make sure you make the most of it. So I know that they're going to come in focused, prepared, all of that. That said, I don't know if the Steelers have the talent to make it happen. They do have a lot of talent along the defensive front outside of TJ Watt, but I think not having him, like you said, they've been 1-10 without him in the past. I know last year he missed a handful of games, and obviously not the exact same roster, but that defense really looked very different without him. So I gotta agree that it's probably a blowout, but I do think that you're going to see some focus players. You're going to see some guys that are motivated and making plays, but I do think that Buffalo's just better in the end.
Yeah, I do too. But the Buffalo offensive line's definitely been a little shaky. Josh Allen's consistently under pressure a lot this season. That's why a little prop that I'm liking in this game is Josh Allen to go over 36.5 rushing yards. One, because of the weather, I think that's going to play a factor. I think he's going to be scrambling a lot. But two, there's going to be a lot of designed runs and scrambles with this unit, because the fact that the Buffalo Bills are going to give up pressure to the Steelers, whether TJ Watt is playing or not in this game. So something to look at there. Would you like that play?
Oh, yeah. And also just in general, the Steelers have given up a lot of yards this year. They've been a good example of a bend don't break defense a lot of the year, where they've given up a lot of years and then they'll kind of find that turnover in the red zone or something. But I think that on top of what you were saying there about just having to get those design runs and everything, I think that just Pittsburgh also just gives a lot of yards too. So another opportunity for Josh Allen to pick up some yards with his legs there.
Definitely. 3 games to go here. We have the Packers versus the Cowboys. Line opened at 7.5 in a favor in Dallas. Is dropped back to 7. The Packers have some guys up front that can get after the quarterback here, but I think Dallas is going to be a little too strong at home. The only thing is Dallas offensive line really has not been able to find a run game, and we can blame it on Ezekiel Elliott's departure, but they just haven't found a groove with Tony Pollard as the feature back. So how does Green Bay come into this one and try to shut down this Dallas Cowboys offense from a front 7 perspective?
Yeah, I think they just want to come in. These are both physical fronts, both the Dallas offensive line and the Packers defensive line. They're both groups that want to play a very physical brand of football. So I'm sure they'll both be coming off the ball, trying to get into each other and kind of get that neck to snap back a little bit. So I think from the Green Bay perspective, you want to establish that you're the more dominant line if you're trying to make stop Dallas here, and you got to just in the run game get your arms extended, lock out, kind of shed and peek over into your gap there, be able to shed and make a play, because if you don't, then could be a long day. And I also see Dallas just maybe trying to pass the rock a little bit against Green Bay based on the Packers have a lot of good pass rushers, but they don't really have a premier rusher. It's kind of more of a flat kind of distribution, I would say, among their defensive linemen. And they've got some really good ones. I don't want to say they don't, but it's just they don't have that elite tier guy on their roster. And I think the Cowboys should be able to handle them up front in the passing game too.
Yeah, the matchup I'm looking at is when Green Bay runs the ball against the Dallas Cowboys, because we know the Cowboys are an undersized defensive front. Green Bay has some guys that can run the football, middle of the league when it comes to rushing yards per game. But we've seen Dallas get exploited on the ground this season. So I think Green Bay probably comes out and tries to do that, keep the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands, and really, eases Jordan Love into this football game, work some play action with him.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. We saw a game where the Cowboys lost to Arizona, who is a team picking in the top 5 because of that, where They just try to get into them and be physical in the run game, and kind of shocked everybody around the league with that one. So I think that's probably the blueprint, and we'll see if they can stick to it.
Yeah, the most physical teams, if it comes to betting and DFS play, like the most physical teams, the ones that can run the football, chances are they're going to find a way to come out on top, because that means something in the postseason. Probably means double in the postseason. Moving into our next game, two really physical teams, Los Angeles Rams going against Detroit Lions. This is a Super Bowl for the Lions. They have not hosted a playoff game since it was the NFC Central 30 years ago. So they're going to be ready to go. When did the NFC Central become the NFC North?
I think it was I want to say 01 or 02, because it's when so growing up in the Seattle area, I remember is when the Seahawks moved from the AFC to the NFC, because they had 32 and got that realignment. But man, I forgot about that. It's been a while.
I don't remember the NFC Central really in my lifetime, so that's the only. Yeah, I gotta do some history.
Well, shoot, it was also back. So sorry for this brief sidebar, but when my dad played for the Saints, they were in the NFC West along with Atlanta, which I don't know how that makes sense. It was Atlanta, New Orleans, and then you got San Francisco, and it was, I think, the LA Rams at that time. But yeah, definitely not geographically accurate, I would say, description of where those cities are. So.
No, definitely. So the Lions needed to hang a new championship banner, because they obviously didn't have an NFC North championship banner. It will be their first home playoff game. The Rams are a team, though, you don't want to face. From a defensive front perspective, they're very good. But at the same time, too, I do think the Lions are going to come in and have success on the ground in this game with their offensive line. I love Frank Ragnow. I've loved him since he literally broke his neck and stayed in the game. Broke his I think his speech esophagus or speech box. Remember that story a couple of years ago?
Don't recall that, but that sounds like an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and Taylor Decker, who I've always been a fan of. I think the unit gets after, and they have a 1-2 punch, really 1A, 1B punch with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think they're going to have success. I think this quickly becomes a shootout for the Rams. So how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, also coming home for Matt Stafford. But yeah, I think this one, you kind of named off some of those guys on that offensive line. This Lions offensive line is one of my favorites, probably my second favorite going in this playoffs. I think they can establish something there. The LA Rams, they do still have Aaron Donald, who is a very good player. Kobe Turner's come on the second half of the season as well. But I think that the Detroit Lions offensive front is a bit too much for that front seven on LA defense. And when you get to the other side of the ball, I think it should be a more even matchup. I think that LA can definitely find some success. I think Detroit also might be able to stop them a little bit. I think it'll maybe be a little bit more back and forth, but I think Detroit just has such an advantage.
Yeah, I agree. And on the other side, too, I want to give a shout out to the Los Angeles Rams offensive line. They've been sensational protecting Matthew Stafford this season. That's going to be huge because this Lions team in the secondary is not nearly as good as they are when it comes to defending the run game. So I think the Rams are going to put up points. I think the Lions are going to put up points. It's definitely a tough matchup here. But from a DFS perspective, which we'll talk about at the end, I wouldn't want either of these units because I think points are going to be given up on both sides.
No, I totally feel that. Absolutely.
And then our final game here, Monday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles, who rumors reporting that, ESPN said this, Nick Sirianni may be out of a job potentially if they lose this game, which is kind of wild to think. But he is potentially on the hot seat going against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are over the moon just for being in the playoffs right now. So two totally different sides here. I don't really know who's going to win this football game. I would lean towards probably taking 3 points with the home team with the Buccaneers here. But Tampa Bay's defense, they have dudes all over the field that can make plays and shut down the run game. They can step up in the red zone here. They've given up the fourth least touchdowns in the red zone this season. So what do you see? What's the key to success for Tampa Bay's defense going against a Philly offense that really has struggled a little bit the past few weeks?
Yeah, I think really, and I've said it before with Tampa Bay, I think it starts with Vita Vea there, and he's going against probably the best center in the league in Jason Kelce. That's just going to be a matchup of titans there. So I think it really starts with that. If you get Jason Kelce, obviously, when you're playing in the middle, you kind of look at those three guys in the middle as kind of a unit. So he does get some help from his guards, whether you're running that zone or you're in pass protection, sliding, or turn protection or anything like that. But if Vita Vea can kind of take one or two of those guys and free up the linebackers, especially you got back there, I think that is going to make them be able to be a little bit more dynamic both in the run and the pass game. You've got some young guys there too. With Yaya Diaby has been kind of coming on there late in the year, and Kalijah Cansey, I know we've talked about as well, has played better on the back half. So I think that this Tampa Bay defense has the pieces to be successful against Philly, especially the way Philly's been playing. That said, when it comes to the trenches, I still do like Philadelphia as my best offensive line in the playoffs here. Just a very dynamic group. They can beat you in a lot of ways. They can be physical with you, run through you. They can be more athletic than you, kind of get to the edge. They can do a lot of things to beat you, but unfortunately for them, the skill positions also matter. And recently, like I said, like the last month or so, like this team hasn't been clicking. And even though you still see it with the line, the team hasn't been working for them. So I think there are opportunities for Tampa to still make plays here. Despite the line matchup there. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I missed that. I was lagging a little bit on this end, but I really like the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. Really like them a lot. The defensive line, though, seems to play a little lazy as of late. They haven't necessarily been getting the most pressure on the quarterback. Like, a guy like Jordan Davis, like he needs to step up a little bit in this spot. And they need those veterans to come through and play well in this game to really shut down the Buccaneers. Because if you let Tampa Bay hang around, I think that's where the trouble goes. Going back to the skill players, though, A.J. Brown deleted everything Eagles from his Instagram. So that's probably not a good sign coming into this game, because if they didn't have A.J. Brown or a happy A.J. Brown, it could be a long night for the Philadelphia Eagles, even against a team like the Buccaneers.
Yeah. And that's it sounds like a lot of turmoil in Philadelphia right now. It's crazy to think that the coach that took them to the Super Bowl last year, and they're in the playoffs again, but he's on the hot seat already. It's high expectations out there.
Definitely high expectations. Well, everything went south when he started screaming at the Chiefs fans. I think they won 2 games. They were 2-5 to end the season after that. So that was probably the kiss of death for him. But a player prop I want to ask you about: Rachaad White over under 63.5 rushing yards. We know the Buccaneers continue to give him the football, no matter if it's working or not. This Tampa Bay offensive line, they drafted Cody Mauch. I think they're going to be very good in the future. Not necessarily there yet when it comes to the run game. So do you see him going over or under this line?
Yeah, you said it there. They're not a very good offensive line in the run game. I do think it's a good offensive line passing the ball. So depending on what his total yards prop is, I'd probably look at that a little bit more for over maybe. But as far as rushing yards, I think I got to take the under here. Philadelphia, I know their defense has struggled a lot, but they've struggled mightily against the pass game. The run game, not as much. And I think, Tampa Bay's run game has been a little bit has left some to be desired there. And they've got those big bodies up front in Philadelphia as well. Those defensive tackles you talk about haven't been able to get pressure on the quarterback necessarily recently, but a lot of times those guys with that kind of size, that athleticism, makes it tough to open up rushing lanes. And when you got a team that doesn't regularly open up those rushing lanes anyway, I think I've got to take the under on those rushing yards there.
Yeah, 63.5 is a steep line, considering he was nowhere close to this in week 3 when these two teams faced off in Tampa Bay. But anyways, Max, to end the show here, we got our DFS value plays. So throw your favorite one at me, and let's break it down.
Yeah, this week, DFS, I am looking for a little bit of a budget play. I know we had that in the show throughout the year, so I am trying to save a little bit of money, try to spend elsewhere. And I'm going to take Kansas City for 2,900. Just think that their defense has been a bigger part of their success than it has been over the last 5 or 6 years, or however long it's been since Patrick Mahomes has been there. The offense has not always put them in the best spots this year. And I think this is an opportunity for them to show that they can get wins without their offense necessarily performing to their peak performance. And you get a Miami team coming in the cold. Maybe the offense can help you out a little bit, especially with that edge situation we talked about earlier, and pin Miami back. But this Kansas City defense is a good one, and I think that's a good price to be able to get them at.
Yeah, that would be my favorite play as well. A risk play, if you want to take it, just because the weather and the wind's going to be so bad, would be the Pittsburgh Steelers for $2,600. Yeah. I know they don't have TJ Watt, but the line keeps dropping in this game, the total. I don't see a lot of points being scored. I don't see a lot of yards through the air. So another reason to potentially take the Steelers. It's definitely a risk, though, going against Josh Allen and company.
Yeah. Well, and Pittsburgh has also turned a lot of turnovers into defensive points there, too, which I know is a big deal in those DFS games. So And Josh Allen's thrown a few picks this year as well. So definitely another, like you said, a great risk play. It's one that caught my eye as well. TJ Watt, as you mentioned, makes you a little bit more nervous, but yeah.
You're going to get points for turnovers with Josh Allen. That's probably that's almost we can guarantee a couple things. Probably a turnover for Josh Allen in this football game, especially with the cold and all that. But anyways, Max, great time talking about the wild card weekend. We don't know our schedule coming up throughout the rest of the playoffs for this show, but Max, you have some offensive line, defensive line rankings on site now.
So offensive line, defensive line playoff rankings just went up on the site yesterday. So go check those out, or you can go to my Twitter at Maxx Forde. Got a couple of tweets there. You can that link to the 33rd team site if you want to get there that way. So go check out those rankings. Got, like I said, a lot of good units in the playoffs, and I think it's because the big guys matter a little bit, maybe.
The big guys do matter. We don't get a lot of credit, but definitely the best teams in the postseason are the ones that have the best units up front. So anyways, Max, good show today. We appreciate you guys joining us on the 33rd team here. Check out all the site, all of the 33rdteam.com, which is linked down in the description below for all your fantasy and betting news. And we will see you soon for another episode of Win the Line.